We're meeting for this Orion series lecture today in the Chief Dan George Theatre, a space named after the actor, author, musician, and activist who was a chief of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation and a fierce advocate for Indigenous resurgence and empowerment. And so whenever I enter this space and whenever I have my students enter this space, I consider how the work we do as educators of future citizens that hopefully are going into the world creatively minded can honor Chief Dan George's legacy. My name is Sasha Kovacs. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Theatre here at the University of Victoria Faculty of Fine Arts. And I'm here today to introduce the Faculty of Fine Arts Orion lecture from our guest, Michèle Moss. Thank you for being here. And the title of this talk today is Jazz It Up, a conversation about music and dance. And so as indicated by this title, this will be a conversation. And I think the improvisatory, is that the word?
Sure.
Improvisatory quality of this format is certainly in the spirit of jazz. So as I introduce Michèle by reading her bio, I have an activity for all of you, which is to think about the questions that you'd like to ask as you hear about this extraordinary artistic history. So here it is. Are you listening? Michèle Moss, who holds a Bachelor of Education and is a Master of Arts, is a dancer, choreographer, researcher, and community educator. She is currently an associate professor at the University of Calgary Faculty of Arts, SCPA, what's that?
School of Creative and Performing Arts.
Thank you. In dance. And her dedication to discovering the nature of jazz dance and jazz music has led her to circle the globe. She began her pedagogical and ethnographic research in Africa in 1987, searching for the roots of jazz dance, followed by numerous return visits to her main research site of Guinea, Conakry, and many Caribbean and North American field sites such as Cuba and Trinidad. Michèle is co-founder of concert jazz dance company and community school DJD, Decidedly Jazz Danceworks, which is located in Calgary, Alberta. And she enjoyed a performing career with the DJD company and created many works for the concert stage from 1986 through to 2021. Are you thinking of questions? Her research in the Academy mostly takes the form of performance creation projects, often with live music, but also includes textual projects such as writing that address the history of jazz dance. She's a frequent conference presenter and has published her research in dance studies, but also African studies and some music and theater-focused gatherings. And recent fieldwork forays include returning to primary research sites in Guinea and Senegal in 2019. Michèle teaches global dance forms, rhythm-based jazz technique, pedagogy, and performance creation. She collaborates with musicians in the studio and on the stage, and she has been fortunate to have collaborated with many composers and guided students in creating their own rhythms. What a beautiful way of thinking of education. So while you all take in that history, which is incredible to share,
A life, we all have them, and I'm sure yours are as rich.
Yeah. And as you consider the questions that you'd like to ask, I'll start with a question by kind of getting us going. And I wanted to start with some background, pre the bio, that asks you to speak to your pre-professional experiences that aren't necessarily always reflected in bios, but nevertheless, I think really inform our professional trajectories. And I think might be of interest to some of the students here today as well. What drew you to dance, generally? And can you pinpoint the moment you were introduced to jazz, either as jazz dance or as jazz music, and what that inspired in you?
Well, one of the human frailties seems to be memory. And so I have to often lean and I ask my mother, and in the day, my father has passed, and I would ask him questions too. My mother will say now, I don't remember. I don't know, I can't remember. And I would ask my dad. Now I have many cousins, and I just had dinner with a cousin in Vancouver who I hadn't seen for a long time. And I asked him many questions about the NCC. When I arrived in Canada, in Montreal, from England, I went immediately to the NCC, and the NCC is the Negro Community Center in downtown Montreal. And my father we lived with relatives for a little while, but we had bought a home. No, not we, they had bought a home in a suburb, a northern suburb, and it was a long way to get downtown. And I got to take the bus by myself into Montreal and go hang out with my cousins in the evening and go to the Negro Community Center. Now, the Negro Community Center was an extraordinary place where a lot of, and if you've ever seen the NFB film, Showgirls, there are a number of women and men that ended up staying in Montreal. It was on their tour, and they spent time in Montreal, either single gigs or on the stage, and they were floor shows, showgirls, they were, pianists, they were horn players, vocalists, they did all kinds of things. And so the NCC profited from these women, and Olga Spencer was the director of this program, and she came up from Harlem. So I had no idea what I was getting. I was 10 years old. The best part of it was I had just come from England, and they had chips, meaning French fries, and they were delicious, and that's what I remembered. That's what I knew. And of course, I remember the tap dancing, and I had tap danced in England, and so it was just a natural progression. My mother and father, both of them appreciated dancing, music. My father in England, he had moved from Jamaica during the war to provide service. He was an electrical engineer, and he did work there, but he also, my mother and him went on to create an informal club without liquor for young people to come together to dance. My father had a great many can't remember the word. What's the big machine? And it takes your records and it plays them? Jukebox, yes. So he had many jukeboxes out around the city, and he had one in this nightclub, and that was one of the ways that they met, through his business, through his fixed televisions and that were new on the scene, and radios, and also provide these jukeboxes to a city. And so that's how I came to dance. My mother, and it's also in the education system. It's really embedded in England. And so I was happy to go. We danced in school, but I also danced on the weekend. When I came to Canada, I went to the tradition of the Saturday cultural school. And it just happened that my cultural teachers were singers and dancers and musicians, and in the jazz tradition. Now, I did only last there for 2 years. It was a bit fraught, and my father said, okay, time to focus on school. And also, my lunch money would get stolen every week because I wasn't that streetwise. So I had to move away from that, sadly. But it was a beautiful beginning.
Yeah. It's interesting, thinking about training. I have in training in dance, I've got a young daughter that's enrolled in dance and that loves dance, which is surprising because I can hardly, take 2 steps without falling over my feet. But I've been struck that today so much training still begins with ballet. And, what about jazz? I asked on a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, can you talk about your early experiences pursuing training in jazz? How and where did you go about acquiring that, following, the NCC? Who was most influential in that early training history? Yeah.
I do. I have lots to tell you. Now, Kim, may I ask you, should I put the images on in the background? Will that just give you a little more fodder to say who, what, where, when? It's just a life. That's what the pictures are. I left out my birthday pictures of when I was 7, but other than that, it's just... So, my mother. After these social dance opportunities, dances with my family, basement dancing, wedding dances, I was just with my brother in Montreal, and we were laughing our heads off because his first time in the spotlight was at a wedding, and I was like, I didn't know you knew how to break dance. Like he was all of, 12 or 13 or something, and he laid it down on the dance floor, and I was like, good for you. So there were all kinds of ways. My cousins taught me the latest steps. We watched them on Soul Train from Montreal on a fuzzy television that you couldn't really see what was happening, but we learned the latest dances. So social dance was a very big part of my training. And I had started formally in England with tap dance. And then the best part of it was the theater show we put on when we were, when I was like 6 and 7. And when I moved to London, I got to have the big role. I was the bride, and there was a groom, and it was because I was going away. And that was so instrumental. The costumes, the lights, I loved it. So I kept going. And then in Montreal, I took ballet class, as we are wont to do. And we took jazz class, and my teacher, I loved her. I loved the people that I danced with. But it was very, ballet jazz, which makes sense in Montreal because of that company. But even when I watched that company, my heart would go pitter-patter. I knew that it was for me. And that was right at when it had, close to when it had been formed. And in fact, the Victoria connection is I came to work with Constantine Darling here, and that was because I knew his name from Montreal, even though I hadn't studied with him. So those early days, then I went downtown to Montreal to take a jazz class, and there was a lot of complicatedness because I wanted to go back to something you mentioned in there. And one of the words I love was empowerment. It was empowerment for me. And I want to share that with people. And that has kind of been the thrust of my pedagogy. So I did go to New York City in 1981 and was just, it's my people. They go to nightclubs and there's music and there's dance. And yes, I was taken by my mentor and teacher, who is a woman of Scottish heritage, and she brought us to New York. And then I have since gone on to lead many travel studies, to have that be enjoyed by my students. We went to Lincoln Center, we went uptown, we went downtown. We met luminaries, we danced with dancers who had been dancing for 40 years in New York, and 20-year-olds. So New York City and those larger centers were also a big part of it. But it was also luck would have it. I left Montreal, wanted to see the world, went to Calgary, met a number of people who then said, oh, you're dancing, you should take this class or go here. Met Vicky, went to university, but didn't know she taught there. And the very first day I met someone, the very first day on campus, I met someone who I had met in the community class. And she said, "Are you coming to class?" I was like, "What? Where? When? What are you talking about? Here at the university?" And unfortunately, do you know that to this very day, people still say to me, "You can study dance at the university, post-secondary? What do you guys do?" It's like theory to bend your mind. The conference I just came from, first time it was in Canada, the Dance Studies Association. So many amazing people doing great work, great things to read, beautiful. My host, Alana, and my friend, has written so many beautiful books, because really my upbringing couldn't help but align me, bring my shoulders towards this idea of plurality, equity, diversity, inclusion, all the things we're talking about now. When I was at that NCC school, one day, 13, 14 kids come in, and they're downtown at the Negro Community Center to do their good work. And I look at them and I go, "Oh, you guys are all from my school." In the suburbs, all the white kids had come down to NCC to do some good work, and it was complicated to my little mind at that time. I was just like, what is going on here? Anyway, I moved west, as I said. I met Vicki and Hannah.
Who's Vicki?
Vicki Willis is my mentor, and we were students of her, Hannah Stillwell and I. And one day I said to Hannah, "I think we should start a company." Because we didn't necessarily want to. I loved New York, but it's a hard go. So I was like, maybe we don't move to New York, maybe we just dance here.
Interesting.
Summer work, there's a theater, you know the story.
Yeah.
Build the theater, they will come. Well, there was already a noon theater, and they were dark every summer, so we could use that space. And that's what we did. And, tons of work. And eventually also, life changes. I wanted to have a baby, and I shifted gears, moved to the academy, and had a lot of assistance and guidance and goodwill. People. I empowered myself, but I was also empowered by other people who were like, "Yeah, we love this work. Come, do this work here." And so that was very pleasing to me.
I wonder if we can go back to the start of that company, Decidedly Jazz Danceworks, co-founded in 1987, is that right?
84.
84. How did this company at the time figure within the landscape of Canadian dance? And what are you most proud of in your decades of work with that company?
Well, you know that it was very difficult and awkward in the Western provinces, kind of like an outback station. And there were many beautiful, even in the day, festivals and programs in the summer, and I would see all these people of color, and I would go, "But where are you?" And they're doing what people do to this day, which is, as immigrants, as first, second, third generation, they're working hard, and they don't choose to, are not aware their time is limited to come downtown. So I found my way to those communities too, and met people. But really, the work was done with a group of allies who recognized that the work was compelling for our community. And Vicki had long-standing, she's 10 years older than me, and she had long-standing history of making dances and teaching jazz dance. And she hadn't gone to the roots, but she had beautiful teachers that showed her an array. And she had come back from Europe and was disillusioned by what jazz was looking like. It had turned all into ballet-esque, with a little jaunty hip there and a hand there, and so she wanted to and we wanted to, so we went back to swing dancing, we went back to tap, we went and we found lots of collaborators, and most importantly, music and musicians. Jazz music, studying it, digging deep, understanding how it is, what its history is, where the breakaway happened from dance, because of course that was a natural course of history given what had happened in America and in Canada. And again, things are a little bit different in Canada. And in fact, that's what I'm doing on this sabbatical swing round. I also want to listen. I want to hear what people's relationship with the theater, with concert work, with social dance, with jazz, with other forms of dance that are on the jazz continuum. A big part of my life has been social dancing. So I loved going to the nightclubs. And I don't know what to do now because I can't go to the club at 11 o'clock. I'm not tough enough. I'm in my bed going, I meant I'll go tomorrow. So I heard that there's many places like this, but in Vegas, I always remember hearing about that there was this scene and everyone would go dancing. There's tons of partner dancing. You dress to the nines and it's at 4 o'clock. In the afternoon. I was like, now that's
something.
That's something that I can.
That's something we can pick up.
And the thing about the Western Canadian location, I don't want to get too cheesy, but it's a bit pioneery. And this was something contemporary, meaning there are pioneers there that like, we'll start it, let's do it. And so we did. And there were other people that were with us. They wanted to come to the theater. It was theater dance in the studios. We taught all kinds of dance. I can't wait. I might have to stop things soon and go over and greet Stacy, who her family is a huge part. The Horton family in general is a huge part of the Decidedly Jazz story, in that we needed guidance in commerce and in finding space and raising money, and the school was a huge part of our popularity because people brought their children there. They were, the exchange, in the commerce department was very real. Their kids were like, oh yeah, I love it, let's go back. And so maybe you'll tell us a story later, and I'll have to slide over there and squeeze you right now. So informal, but we got to do it. Yeah, beautiful long legs. She's
hello,
good.
baby.
Oh, so nice to see you. Here. And Stacy came with me. I had met a group of people in upstate New York, and in New York proper, of course, there's lots of classes, but this was a real coming together of people of color and white people of all different backgrounds in upstate New York for 10 days at a summit, at a workshop, where we studied drums, we studied all different kinds of dances of the diaspora, from Haitian dance to capoeira to Brazilian candomblé to West African dance, Congolese dance, all different things. And Stacy also came to that. And these opportunities through travel studies of all kinds, through the institution, through the academy, they fed it more. And 38 years later,
Wow.
company's still going.
Amazing. I want to get back to what you were mentioning about dance and music, the space between music and dance. The space that's mentioned as the focus for this talk. When we talk about jazz, are we always necessarily talking about movement as sound and sound as a dance? You know, how do you think through music and movement, music and dance through jazz?
That's a really important part for me. It was something that Vicky gifted to me, and when I started teaching and understanding the musical form, she was also schooled by her friends who were musicians. And so, you know, we would watch each other, and I went on to be the one who would watch teachers to give them feedback on their pedagogy and on their content and all that. But she was, you come to my house tonight, we got some work to do. So it was down to the nitty gritty of, you know, honor the form, know the time signature, know the stories. Now that did come in that one night, but in that one night I just was like, okay, yeah, I know, okay, gotta do better. You don't just have the artists, the young students, the student artists, just enter the tune any old where.
Interesting.
So we honored all that. That was an important part. And of course, some stories of the jazz continuum are not good for the 6-year-olds. We don't tell all those stories to everyone, but there are many beautiful stories, uplifting stories, stories of difficulty and trauma, individual stories of triumph and empowerment that we spoke about before. So it is a rich, realm to dig into and bring forward.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm going to pause and ask if folks here have any questions based on where our conversation's been going, or any comments.
Oh, you can ask me about who's that in that photo if I catch it in time.
I know during your biography, it was mentioned how you were traveling kind of all over, like learning and growing as a dancer. I was just wondering if you could speak to some of that.
Yes, we were just joking as we came in. I don't know what made me think of it, but I was deported from Poland. That's a good story. And I was... Why? It was politics. Politics that had to do with Canada and Poland having a little schism. Something, they got hot under the collar about, and they denied Canadians access. And I was arriving, and my colleague, I was with her, and they said, great, here's my passport. And they were like, where is your, what's that called? And they stamp it and you have to request it.
Visa?
Yeah. Visa, thank you. It's my second brain blip. Where's your visa? And I looked at my colleague, where is my visa? And she was like, oh, I forgot. I thought you were American. And she's American, and Canadians needed one, and that's usually not a problem. You just turn to a counter, buy it, and then turn back, but it wasn't available. Anyway, I was there to teach jazz. And when they deported me and I had 1 hour sleep and I was standing at Heathrow, I went, I'm done, I'm going home, enough. And my colleagues were like, no, they're driving across Poland to another city, and they're trying to convince me. I don't know how we did this because I didn't have a cell phone at that time. Anyway, they were trying to convince me and and I did. I rallied and I got back on and shared the work with people in Poland. So lots of international teaching assignments in Italy, in England, and also traveling for my own betterment. I just in 1999 was in Senegal again, probably, I don't know, the 6th or something time. So I did start going to Africa in 1986 out of interest, and I could see the work, I could see jazz in the footwork, and I was interested to know, and I wanted to know more. The spirit, nightclub dancing, so beautiful and amazing. And leading students also brought me into the field again, and I got to share that way, as well as heat up the economy in Guinea-Conakry. It's a very depressed, economically depressed environment and community, and it's just makes me happy to bring, buckets of money there, because when you transfer our Canadian dollar to theirs, then you end up with very exciting pounds and pounds of or kilograms, I should say, of money. And I can't think of what else. And I just love seeing the world and going. I made my husband go to India with me. I said, pick any continent, where are we going? You get to choose. He hates traveling. And we went for 4 months and he loved it. We went to India.
I think for some of the students here that might be interested in doing sort of ethnographic research, that experience that you have, right, of traveling to other places and learning from these different cultures is very interesting. How did you approach that work in the 80s, and did you return to it differently when you were in Senegal in 2019? Has your approach to that shifted at all?
There are many contestations in this time, of course. The beautiful thing, and I know that we're all very different, is the fact that I had a long relationship there, that I returned to the country. I returned with gifts and information for them to build their own records, if it's a long-term place to go. I spend a fair amount, not as much as I should perhaps, at Western Union, sending money to help and support and give a leg up to those artists, or allow them to come here. So we're working on, at the university right now, at the University of Calgary, bringing an artist from Uganda who I met, who's doing really powerful work with particularly hip hop and theater collaborations and music. And he's been a fellow on the Obama Fellow in the United States, and he has a perspective on social justice. So that's the other thing that we do when we're in the field. We share those ideas around what has to change and how can we help. And I know that things are, people see it differently. I read a lot in the journals, in the academy, on the theory of, for example, anthropology is changing a lot about how the work is done in the field, and I know that people feel differently. Even everything that I said, I had a conversation with a colleague. Now, it wasn't a very direct conversation, but I said something about being in Guinea, and I said, and with the permission of the artistic director of the national company, one of them, over time they have changed. Les Ballets Africains is the name of the Guinea-Conakry. And I say it like that because Guinea gets confused with a number, the capital is Conakry, but there are a number of different places. So Guinea-Bissau and other Guinea countries get confused with it. But I said we have his permission to share, and not just him, but the dancers, the musicians. That's what we do. We go, we engage with them, we have breakfast with them, we have dinner with them, we buy them, new instrument or whatever.
So relational.
Yeah. And even in the face of that, I know that there are some people who just go, not good enough. But we must open our ears, hear what is in circulation, and maybe change our behavior. And my behavior will be changing anyway because of, I don't have as much of an impulse to travel around the globe, burning up the Earth's atmosphere with all that jet travel. And, but I don't know, I miss those people that I built relationships with.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. I'm sorry I can't reduce it in a few words, but I've been doing a lot of homework on that piece.
Great, thank you for sharing. Yeah. Questions at all? I have more.
And thank you for this. Thank you. Because it's nice to bounce. Otherwise, I would have just stood up here going, and when I was 9. No, I wouldn't have done that.
You mentioned this a little bit in some of your earlier remarks, but I wonder if you could talk about the relationship between codified tradition and individual expression within the context of jazz dance.
Yeah. Well, there's always a tradition to dip into, to pull it forward. So if we think about the jazz continuum and recognize that it is always evolving, because in fact, jazz, music, dance, one of the ethos of that is it is of the day. It is a snapshot of today. And all its contestations and all its conflict and difficulty. And tomorrow is such an important part of it. Where will it go? So you may have seen some pictures in the slideshow. I bring this work to the classroom in all different kinds of ways. Of course, we have not had many artists of color, but we have many interested parties in jazz and in changing the relationship from how the studios commercialized it and relate to the form. But the thing is it is improvisational. So the story is of you and of me. There's meta stories that are about the human spirit. There are stories of Martin Luther King's moment when he was shot, and I embedded it, and only the dancers and I knew, is embedded as a little tableau in it, and we spoke about it. It was a piece about protest and taking action and making change. And I think that's one of the pieces of jazz. Of course, we know that it was used as a big voice of the civil rights movement, and there were many artists, many musicians and vocalists and dancers, and many people of color, many people not of color who supported and knew the history. So the idea, something that many people mention, there's an image of a Sankofa or the Sankofa bird who looks back and takes an egg that is the wisdom of this tradition, and at the same time he's moving that way. So we're making sure that we don't make a new form. And is it dead? It's not to me. Is it dying? It might be. And maybe it'll just be part of the transformation. So hip hop and urban social dance is part of the continuum, part of the jazz continuum, and all the things that are embedded in there that are complicated and require some sitting with and some study of and some embodiment of. And that's what I do in the classroom. And so, yes, that's why I feel like I've been doing this work for a long time, relating it to social justice work, sitting on plurality committees in the academy, in the community, since, a while now. And we're waiting for the action to take place. And it's getting there, but, at least out of the horrors of the last decade and the last 5 years, perhaps, there is some action. I've never seen so many people of color on commercials.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, you eat Jell-O too? Yes, I knew that. Now everyone knows it. So isn't that wonderful? Mm-hmm. And we name and we label and, all kinds of things happen in dance class, from musicians in the classroom, West African ensembles that just rattle the ears of people coming in the kinesiology building, running over to my studio to close my door. Oh yeah, you don't do that. Open my door, because that's what the studio's there for. Should we be quiet as mice? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we are, and sometimes we're not.
Yeah.
So lots of people know I've mentored many, and West African is in many of the school programs because there's a need. Our demographic is changing. I went to a school the other day, a high school. I had no idea in Calgary, Alberta, 98% Black and people of color. I was shocked.
In a high school?
In a high school.
Wow.
In the Northeast, in the suburbs. So yeah, things are moving, changing. I forgot your question.
No, yeah.
Did you forget it too?
A little bit, yeah, I did a little bit. Yeah, I think you got to that question thinking about the relationship between the codified tradition and the individual expression and the shifts there. I think that image of the Sankofa, as you said, is such a powerful image to think through that question.
And improvisation is so amazing for artistic development. Many of the students come never having.
Teach that?
Oh, there's some challenges. It's again, and they just want to do big kicks from the corner, and some different kinds of jazz that they know. And the good news is it doesn't take them long, and they jump in. And
it's scary to improvise.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was there myself.
Yeah.
Even though I had training in that. I hit the nightclub dance floor. I hit the dance floor at a dance party, and I'm not doing choreography. I don't go to the nightclub and do what I learned early. I do my thing, and I was still nervous because you think, and so we speak a lot about it.
Yeah. I want to make sure that I'm getting questions from folks. If you have any, I'll leave a second for you to think on your own questions.
I'm sorry, me again.
Yeah.
As a choreographer, do you find you tend to work more in collaboration with the dancers or with the musicians, or if you have a co-choreographer, or do you usually come up with kind of a game plan and just let it evolve from there?
I've done everything. So in the early days, I thought that being a choreographer meant this, that, and the other. One of the things was you're prepared. You know what you're doing, Then over time, I shifted and changed, and we would try many different soundtracks. And they were like, but how? And we need to set it, and we need to, and I worked my way through that, and then it's becoming looser and looser in terms of my understanding or misunderstanding or misinterpretation of the jazz as concert dance, what it should be. And I let it evolve. So right down to this moment, when I get back, we just have another week of rehearsal, then we go and bring something to Nafro Dance in Winnipeg. And the work of Casimiro Nussi, he came from Mozambique, was the artistic director of the national company there, and then has been living in Winnipeg for more than 20 years. And I am working with an artist of color who's from Calgary, went to Vancouver, and is now working on his master's and planning for his PhD in dance and social justice, of course, and all the beauty and the richness that he brings from his tradition, studying, like me, ballet and contemporary dance and forms that are rooted in social dance, and powerful hip-hop traditions that have a lot of history, like voguing, etc. So he is, I lost my other artist because, what are they called? Third one, when you are an artist who just works contract freelance. He's a freelancer, and I lost the second artist to a conflict. And now I'm using an artist, not using, that sounds horrible. I am collaborating with an artist who's coming from Toronto and will be put into the work in the moment. And I don't know what will happen. We have some structures that will hopefully guide it so that it's not a crash and burn. And if it's a crash and burn, we'll learn from it. It'll be great.
I have a question. I think your company is a legacy, so what do you imagine they're going to leave that you have what in your dream do you hope is attached to DJD?
I hope it provides a reflection of a particular time, so that there's stories in there and there's individuals that brought this or that, but that they will also help transform tomorrow, the form, continue with that idea of stories that are important to the human experience and to development and change in our culture, and
is there anything that you feel needs to be retained?
I call those themes and threads and essences that are absolutely imperative, that groundedness, the whole body speaking, a certain amount of, I can't even say if it's equal parts or not equal parts, but of joy and uplifting themes and looking at the stories in the eye that are about trauma and difficult content. So that's really important, that we call the names of our teachers and we call the names of the people who were instrumental, and there's so many. I always introduce a million things in class, and I know it goes like this, but I'm calling the names of the musicians' music that we're using. I'm calling the names of my teachers that I've had over the years. I call the names of the icons of the form, and that's important. Tell me, Stacy, tell me something else. What should I be?
It's just a gift what you give your students, and it's in the bones, and it's in the blood, and it's in the spine, and it's all about the rhythm and the joy, and you share the history. You've done this.
Bring. Yeah, and it's just one little perspective. Usually, they're jumping off the spark. Like I jumped off someone's spark, and people say, "Oh, well, you're so passionate, and I don't know what I am. I just know I'm so lucky. I love my work. It's people, it's stories, it's rhythm, it's music.
It's also community. I mean, when I'm back in Calgary and I see a show, I'm so aware of the community of creators. That is always so strong in that company, and reaching out into the community of Calgary as well.
Yeah.
I'm bringing in a diverse group of people.
And that's at the very heart of what jazz was, right? It's community. Whether it was rent parties or juke joints or whatever, that is at the heart of it. Not to say it's not complicated, because you have and we don't. And the new beautiful jazz dance palace that a certain Mr. Horton was so instrumental in helping us get, is also, you know, how did we want one like that? These things happen, this is part of, so, you know, within the community there's ease and then there's also some grist.
How did you build that with your company?
With the help of the government. The gift of the provincial government and their recognition of the work and the longevity and the beautiful work of Kathy Sundstrom, who's the general manager, who got us on track. She was gonna stay for 2 years, and here she is. I think her tenure, first of all, yes, longer than mine. I changed path and I still engage with the company as much as they'll let me. But Kathy Sundstrom, you know, made connections, and she took those spreadsheets and the black and the red, and she aligned them and made the right asks to the right people. So you have to have that savvy. And yeah. Well, the unifying spark is that they have some connection, that it's even on their lips, jazz or jazz continuum or social dance or stories to uplift and empower. But the most important thing is that there's some kind of creative juice that they're, you know, so you invite people and you don't always know what you're gonna get. You invite them to either dance or you invite them to create or to be part of the band, or who knows, all different. And mostly it works out because there is some thought behind it and there's some, you know, conversation, even if it's unspoken, that we know we're kind of on the same path. But the truth is, it can sometimes go wrong, and sometimes it goes terribly wrong. And sometimes when it goes terribly wrong, oh, but there's still a lesson. So one of the things that I'm wanting to talk about, and I don't quite know how to get there in this tour across some, 4 or 5 cities in Canada, is what's the Canadian experience and how is it different than the American experience? And one of the, at some point there was a dancer in the company, he was American, and it was at this time of things being very heated, and he was very confused. Why are you not, and we can't, and the militancy and I will never cast myself, but sometimes because of who I am and where I am in my journey of life, I do behave in a caricature of a Canadian woman. I'm sorry. I do that, and I don't mean to, and I even correct myself, but this person, with his youth and his experiences, brought a certain complication, and the whole thing kind of spun off its axis.
And sometimes that can be a great thing.
And that's what I said, and that's a great thing. Mm-hmm. And it makes the dancers had to find their words. The directors, we had to find, what place do you have in this work? How do you have permission? Mm-hmm. And, the same thing was asked of, many musicians and dancers in the day. The light-skinned dancers that were allowed to be the showgirls that were allowed to be, and the dark-skinned girls that were allowed. So there's shadism, there's all kinds of things. And someone said to me in this complicated time a couple of years ago, but you're not really black. So there's lots of complications. Let me just deal with it. So there's a lot of space, there's a lot of stories to be told, and respect is at the heart.
Thinking about respect a little bit in the context of jazz, Jazz has been appropriated, as we discussed, by white society. And when I think of jazz dance, because I'm not a dancer, right, I think like Fosse.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does your approach to studying and performing jazz work return jazz to its Black African cultural origins? And how do you work through these contexts of appropriation and thinking through those histories in terms of the continuum of jazz in your own work? Or do you?
I do. And there are some things you can't deny. So it's not just studio work. Jazz in, Susie Creamcheese School of Dance, that has an economic, sorry, it's what I've always called it.
Perfect.
Yes. That lack of respect and knowledge, it keeps coming back to that. So I try not to get a tick in my eye, but even in the hallowed halls of the Academy, we have to remember, and I fall into it too. I speak often in I, because I don't want to always implicate others in my perspective or journey, and sometimes I speak about we. But the one thing that I'm really shocked by is how people can deliver their work, their papers, or their books, and still have had so many shoulders to stand on, and so many opportunities to understand, get the information, read the book, watch the films, ask the people that are in your community, find the information. They're still going, yeah, but I didn't know until 5 years ago that jazz had this African American story attached to it. And do you have any ideas for me? What do you say in the face of that? So I moved to my Canadian persona and say, I'm sorry that you missed that information, but there's lots out there. Go get it, and we will just carry on. Remind me again what the question was?
Yeah, I think that spoke to it. How does your approach to studying and performing jazz work return jazz to these Black African roots?
That's exactly what I've done. So yes, many people want to talk about a tree, and the West African roots that informed the African American experience. That's where jazz was born, on those shores. Many people contributed to it, many allies, many interesting stories that are woven into it, and I keep searching them, but that's I don't want to turn it into me search instead of research. So I go there and I move it out as far as I can go, but I learn something every day. I was at a session at the conference that I was just at, and I had my mind blown. I don't know yet. I haven't interrogated it very deeply, but I was just like, what do they call it? No, it's not the right word. It's like heavy metal, extreme. They're using capoeira steps on the dance floor. It's very violent, but it's kind of connected to reggae and skanking, and I was like, what? So I'm going to go down that road for a while and see what I find. So there's a lot to investigate, and hope I come up with some stories, research that feeds me and that shows me all facets of the beautiful gem that is jazz.
Any other questions from folks?
My mouth is dry now. We must dance.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Sure. A little bit. And then we'll dance and we'll go away. So on the screen right now, that was a picture of Frankie Manning. So going to the octogenarians, or the elders, he is now an ancestor, is an important piece to me. So I love to find the lineage in particular teachers who had those that are close to the bone. So I love studying with the swing dance community as they are today, whether it's in Harang or in Sweden or if it's in America or Canada, because they have beautiful information. Let me turn and see what we have here. Little pictures of some of the collaborators. So One Yellow Rabbit in Calgary have been dear friends, and I jump off their spark a lot. That was the place in Senegal. Met so many beautiful people from all over the diaspora. The natural world also fills me with a lot of information. And a boxing piece I made on my collaborator Hannah Stillwell and company members. Youth. This is, we go on trips around the world and sometimes we dance on a beach. And I'm not gonna lie, it feeds me for many, many, many years to come. That's the new beautiful space. We've gone back to the beginning. That's my mom. That's my dad. Oh, what a dirty habit. Made him put those cigarettes down eventually. They met. There was a lot of conflict in the family. This is their social club that they developed, and under the umbrella of music and togetherness, which community. I also watched small acts. I was telling Lete about that the other day. There are so many things that are accessible to us now, and learn something more about the British experience, because it wasn't easy in the day. My father went back to Jamaica. He was going to move from England, move us back to Jamaica, and then he went to Jamaica and he went, yeah, no, we're not doing that. So we went to Montreal and got introduced to my beautiful family, and this is the array of skin tones and beautiful people. That's the thing that I've always been drawn to, the records and the music. I had to put some people in here. That's my mom, my grandmother. And this is what a lot of immigrants do. They bring the people from the Caribbean to the Canadian winter. Why do they do that? So Celestine was very, very accommodating and generous, and she whispered, though, I'd like to go home. Class, bringing musicians into class, putting different ideas and shapes into their body, using it and juxtaposing it. So then students go on to be in the company. An image from TED Talks that was a dance used as communication. We had a young artist come into our program, and I made a dance for her. That's my daughter's eye, just to show you how the complicatedness of DNA and mixing in the world. Articles in magazines, books, concerts, events, special events. I love this. I love that quote. The work is in that book, which is a new one. Again, I would refer to the old book of Jean, and I'll get back to you on that. My favorite book, and it's gone from my head. These are some of the themes and traditions that we worked in. That's ancient history, the university tribe. I met them, and it was part of my forming. It was something elemental. That's us performing a piece that started, that's at Expo 87 or 86.
86.
Worked with One Yellow Rabbit, early photo shoots. The daughter, she studied dance. Was going to dance, and then she didn't. This is us in the field. all kinds of, again, not exoticizing, but just beautiful people that I met. We gathered around the music and the dance and loved it. Cuba.
Beautiful. Well, we have 10 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Would anyone like to ask any kind of concluding questions? Did you want to get us up on our feet doing something?
I think we should.
Yeah. Why don't we?
Yeah.
We're a small group.
All right.
Let's do it.
Nervous
Come
laughter.
join us.
Nervous laughter ensues.
If you like.
I'm the worst DJ though, because I can never decide, because there's so much fantastic music. So I'm gonna just teach us the easiest, tiniest, oh, I shouldn't say that, don't wanna set you up. A little ditty, it's tiny. And I don't know what I'm choosing.
My mother's 285 pounds of jam, jive, and everything. They got me in on this business back, you know, we go get this. Watch out. One of my own compositions. And I ain't.
Come on to the floor. It's a little walk. And you'll need this in so many places in the diaspora when you go to the Brazilian carnival, when you're at a carnival somewhere. But now you're going to use your heel to be your pivot point. And you're just going to let the toes swing out. I give this to you because it's easy and it's so hard. I give this to dancers that have danced for their whole lives and they're just like, not the toes, it's the heels. And now we have to take our arms up overhead. We'll show our armpits. And we move around the room. And I got a nice slow song, a little fat swaller, who was so cheeky in his storytelling. And I want you to work on this every day for this next 4 weeks until you can rock it out and you can book your flight. Still or somewhere. And you can go fast. Release that forefoot, pivot on the heel. This is my father's famous dance that he would always do. Put your hand on your stomach and you just go like into this place where it's pain and pleasure. And you register it on your face. And I'm dying to do this again, to dance with someone other than my husband. To have contact, pandemic, be damned. So, I look you all